Have you ever wanted to pivot, segue in another field? Our amazing featured author for today has worn many hats and proved an expert at pivoting, and we'll find out a bit more about that. He's none other than Robert French, the author of the Cal Rogan crime thrillers, and I believe 7 other books. And today we'll be featuring mostly his book called Jailed. Don't go away. We will be right back.
Thanks for having me on your live show. It was really my pleasure. Your production is just fantastic. Unbelievable how you guys are pulling that off. So organized with segments and transitions and all those different things. Right in line with what I'm talking about in my new book, Going Live. Live stream your podcast to reach more people. Hopefully people tune in for our conversations. Definitely worth the on-demand version, in my opinion, if I may say so myself. You guys are awesome.
I think this might be, I've been on over 24 different podcasts and radio shows in the last couple of months, and this has to be one of the most sophisticated, what the kids that I used to teach call bomb.com shows and presentations that I've ever been on. It looks fantastic.
I love your introduction. How professional. That sounds, I feel like I'm on a beautiful show here.
Folks, welcome.
Available wherever great books are sold near you.
Oh my goodness, Ross, thank you so much.
Thanks. And, this is one of the most fun interviews that I've ever done. So thank you, Bridgetti.
Big pleasure. Ross, take care.
Thank you.
And welcome back. If you've just joined us, I'm from Cape Town in South Africa. Our stream is made possible by StreamYard and BeLive Me. You're watching Books with Bridgetti, and my amazing guest today is Robert P. French. But before we bring Robert on screen, and I can't wait to have a chat with him, one of the things that I love doing is just helping people level up, because a lot of authors are still doing promotions online. I believe some authors are slowly starting to go back to doing in-person book signings and events again. But for those of you, and I think authors will for the foreseeable future incorporate both. So one of the quick tips that I want to share with you, if you are an author or anyone wanting to share something online, I know that one's natural inclination is to use your phone in portrait mode. But the issue with that is that you're trying to show yourself and your book a tiny little space. And so what you can do is turn your phone into landscape mode instead. And that way you've got a much bigger screen real estate and you can talk a lot more comfortably, and it's a great experience for the audience. And another quick tip is to position your phone on a tripod, because it'll be very difficult to hold your phone or stabilize your phone in your hand while you're talking and trying to talk about your book. And if you don't have a tripod, simply you can actually just put tape over your phone and stick it to the window, have light, front-facing light. Those are just quick tips for you when you are trying to promote your books online. So I want to give a hearty warm welcome to you, the audience, whether you are watching us over on Facebook, on Twitter, on Amazon Live. If you are on Amazon Live, do know that Robert French books are in the carousel, so go and grab them there. The book we're going to talk about today is Jailed. That's also in the carousel. If you're watching us over on Amazon Live, you're watching us on YouTube, or if you're catching this on the replay, welcome to the show. So my amazing guest today, Robert, is a software developer turned actor turned author. He has authored the Cal Rogan crime thrillers, and he's got 7 other books, and today we're going to be talking about his book, Jail. So let's not waste any more time. I want to invite Robert to Robert, welcome. Thank you so much for
Thank you very much.
joining us today.
Please excuse the bad lighting and the boxes behind me. We've just moved and I haven't got things set up properly yet, but I will do in time.
It takes time to get settled. I know how, and it's a lot of hard work, you know, and you do the most important stuff, and the rest can just happen whenever you have the energy to do that. So, Robert, for those for anyone out there who doesn't know you, just a little bit about yourself. You started off as a software developer, I believe. How did you get into acting from being a software developer? That's
Well,
a huge leap.
it is. When I was a kid, I really wanted to be an actor. I was in every play that my high school put on. And I loved acting, and I did a couple of plays after school. And I wanted to be a full-time actor. But my father talked me out of it. You know, he said, you know, you need a much more sensible career. And that's what got me into the computer business, which was a really good choice. I had a wonderful career in computers. I thrive on change.
Were you a developer, or were you a programmer? What did you do?
I started off as a programmer and then kind of went up through the ranks and ended up as a chief technology officer for a small high-tech company. There's some noise. So sorry about that noise. I have no idea what it is.
No worries.
It was a wonderful career. I love computers, and the wonderful thing about the computer business is I thrive on change, and the computer business changes every 2 years. You know, there's new hardware, new software, new ideas, and so
it does keep you on your toes.
Yeah, it certainly does, and I just love it. And the acting thing, though, it had always been in the back of my mind, and you might want to read some psychological reasons into this, but after my father died, I decided I would take a shot at acting, and I didn't quit my job. I did it part-time. 90-something% of actors only work part-time as actors. But it got it out of my system, and I really enjoyed it. I was in lots of plays and a couple of films, and it was a lot of fun. And it actually, when I started writing, the acting changed my writing, the way I write. My books are unusual in terms of style because I write in the first person and in the present tense. And it's because when I'm writing, I'm, as an actor, inhabiting the character who's the point of view character of a chapter. So I write it as it's happening. So instead of saying, he woke up with a hangover, I'll say, I woke up. I'm waking up. It's hard. My head really hurts. So I'm writing it from that point of view. And I'm sure that's because of that time as an actor and reading scripts and everything being in the moment. So
doesn't that kind of, I would imagine that transports the reader into a different realm almost, that they're not reading something in the past. It makes them feel like they're part of the story in the present almost.
Yeah, for lots of readers that is the case. some readers, they hate it. I know that people, I've had emails from people saying, I started your first book, but I just cannot, I don't like books written in the first person, and I just couldn't finish it. So that happens, but for a lot of readers, you're right. It puts them in the action, and they're able to live the character's experience, which is obviously sorry, go on.
No, that's okay. What I'm also just thinking is, not every book is for every reader. A different strokes for different folks, and so your genre or your style of writing is going to find its own tribe. And I think there's a huge lesson in that for other authors who are wanting to get into writing, because I think anything that you get into, and especially writing, I think, and this is what I've heard after 4 years interviewing many authors, is that you always try and imitate another author or like another author. And that could be a mistake. What's your take on that? I just want to give a big shout out to Stephen Healy over on Amazon Live. Hi, Stephen. Nice to see you. What's your take on developing your own style of writing as opposed to trying to copy someone else?
Well, yeah, you definitely see people who try to copy other people. Occasionally I'll read a book and I'll say, this could have been written by Lee Child. So clearly the writer is copying the style. But for me, I didn't actively choose to write the way I write. It's just the way the words came into my head. My first book, well, the first book that was actually good enough to be published, it's called Junkie, and it's the first book in my series, and it's about my detective, Cal Rogan, who is a drug-addicted ex-cop, and he wakes up in an alley. And that all came about, that start of that book, because I was doing a consulting contract, and every day I walked past this alley, and it was full of drug addicts. And they used it as their bedrooms, their bathrooms, their kitchens, their dining rooms, and it was a pretty scary place. Well, perhaps scary is the wrong word, but it was very unpleasant. And I mentioned to my editor at the time, and I said, what would it be like to wake up in an alley like that? It would be terrible. And so when we decided an ex-cop would be a good person to wake up in an alley like that, when I started to think about the book and how it would start, the words just came into my mind as, I didn't die. The first words of the book are, I didn't die last night. And the story just kept coming out of me in first person present tense. So that's the way I wrote it. And at one point, somebody said, make it much harder to sell that book. I tried rewriting it in third person past tense, the normal way most books are written. So it would say, he didn't die last night. And I tried to rewrite it, and it just wouldn't work. I just couldn't do it. So I said, okay, stick with what's happening. And I'm glad I did, because I know that lots of people like the style.
Well, just listening to you say that, I get that. I get the sense that you're getting, because if I'm reading, I didn't die last night. I'm almost putting myself in that person's shoes. There's more, to me anyway, there's more emotion in there.
Yeah, if you were sitting opposite somebody having coffee and they said to you, I didn't die last night, then the emotion
pulls you in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I certainly hope it
Wow.
pulls lots of readers in. Yeah.
So your books, are they, as a general rule, do you base them on real people, some of it yourself, or mostly fictional or mixed?
They're mainly fictional. Occasionally, I'll have storylines that in fact, in my new book that I'm working on right now, it is actually based on a real crime that happened. But I've changed the names to protect the guilty, as they say, and but it's based on a real crime. But generally, the stories are completely fictional. The places are all real, and for example, again in the book that I'm writing, my protagonist goes to a specific hotel, and after I finished writing on Saturday, I actually walked down to the hotel and walked in and took a few photographs, so that when I write the chapter where he's at the hotel, I'll have that point of reference.
You can describe it correctly.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Or I tend to not describe things in great detail, but pick on an interesting feature of the place. Something that I do is I don't tend to describe people in a lot of detail, or places in a lot of detail, because and that relates back to a very early experience I had as a reader. I started reading the James Bond books when I was about 12 years old, and so this would be in the 1950s. So it's going back a bit. And in my mind, and I read all the James Bond books that were published then, and I just loved them. They were wonderful. And in my mind, I had a really strong image of what James Bond looked like. So when the first movie came out with Sean Connery, I was so disappointed, because in my mind, James Bond looked a certain way. And it wasn't until Timothy Dalton came along that the Bond, in my mind, actually looked like the actor. So I like, and I enjoy seeing the characters in my mind. So I don't force my readers into seeing what I want them to see, but they can build the character themselves.
Build the character in their own mind. It reminds me a little bit of the days when I listened to stories on the radio, and you have to, you imagine, you sort of, you imagine things in your mind. It was just a different world, as to television. You learned to use your imagination, reading books and listening to the radio. It was another world. And so your love for reading, where did that come from?
My mother and my father, they were both avid readers. The typical after dinner thing was after dinner, washing up gets done, and we'd all sit down and read.
Nice.
And so I was brought up in a family of readers, and the intro that you had to this had a kid in bed with a flashlight reading a book.
Yes,
and I had to laugh at that. That was me. Yes. My mother would always say, "There's something wrong with that flashlight. You keep on needing new batteries."
Meanwhile, she didn't know you were reading at night under the blanket.
That's right. Well, she probably did, but she didn't.
She never told.
No.
Oh my goodness! Oh my goodness! So your first book, what was that experience like for you when you first got published? Because I know a lot of authors talk about, oh dear, I always get these strange Skype calls. a lot of authors talk about how difficult it was to let go of their first book, because it's a little bit of themselves that they're putting out there. What was it like for you, coming from being a software developer and an actor and then publishing your first book? What was that like for you?
Well, that's a great question. No one's ever asked me that before. And you mentioned software development. With software, it's very much like that. As a developer, you always want to add a little bit more, add a little bit more. So you have to get very, very strict about saying, okay, that's it. We're now going to publish this. Yeah. Of course, with software, you can come out with version 2 and version 3 and version 4. But I was working with an editor and got to the point where we'd been through three editing runs where we said, okay, this is good to go. And so at that point, I decided that I wanted to write another book about the same character, with the same characters in it. So we cut it off, and it was good to see it actually published. So it was fairly easy with that book. But there are other books where I've just not wanted to let them go quite as easily. But the first book, because we'd been through so many editing runs, I just wanted to get on to the next one. So
I want to ask you about the Cal Rogan series. How did you decide that was going to be a series? And as we were talking about now, how do you decide this is the end of the series, and that you're not going to carry on, or do you still intend writing a few more?
When people ask me that question, I always plagiarize a quote from Charlton Heston. He said this about guns, but I always say, I'll stop writing when they pry my computer out of my cold, dead hands. So I'm writing a little more.
Until then, you'll keep writing.
I'll just keep writing until I drop. Yes. In addition to the Cal Rogan series, one of the characters throughout the books is his daughter, Ellie, who in the first book is 5 years old. And one of his big motivations about getting off drugs is to have a normal relationship with his daughter. And so his daughter is growing up as the books progress. And I'm writing a novel. It's kind of more part-time because I want to finish the next Cal Rogan book first. But it's set in the year 2024, and she's a 35-year-old cop. And she's investigating a murder that could not be committed today because of how I see the development of certain technologies.
Okay, now you've piqued my interest. Tell me a little bit about that.
So because I've been in the tech business, I'm very interested in the future of technology, and I listen to lots of podcasts and follow certain scientists on YouTube, as to where things are going. Plus, what is the most interesting question for me is we're at a very interesting societal point now. All of social media has completely changed the way we interact with people, and it's creating divisions between people. And so I want to see how that continues on through society for 22 years into the future. So in my mind, I'm creating this world of 2044 as it could very easily be, and it's not it's not a dystopian world. It's not a utopian world. It's just a different world. And a large part of it, I don't write much about the technology, but a large part of it will be based on technology, especially how artificial intelligence will, spoiler alert, my protagonist will have her own personal artificial intelligence that she talks to, that does all her research for her. So if she needs to find out similar crimes in other places, she can just tell the AI, and a minute later it will come back with or half a minute come back with a report for her. So I'm sure that artificial intelligence will change policing dramatically. It'll be I'm really fascinated by the thought. I
can imagine. I mean, the way things are progressing these days in terms of artificial intelligence, it's hard to put anything past the possibilities of where that could even go in future. It's my goodness. I mean, even with deep fakes, it's I can well imagine how that would change the way policing happens in future. And how, just talking about pivoting, because we talked about, how you pivoted, how if you want to keep abreast with, so you've got to be wanting to have this yearning to learn and keep learning and keep up with technology. Because just because you might not like technology doesn't mean that the use of technology out there is going to stagnate.
Right. That's right.
So, you either keep up with it or you're going to be lost in the process.
It's very interesting. You mentioned deep fakes. That's a thing that bothers me a lot. There are two types of software companies out there dealing with deep fakes. There are those who are working on perfecting the deep fake technology. But there's a whole group of software companies out there working on how to detect if something is a deep fake or not. And whoever wins that battle, it will be kind of critical to, if you can make deep fakes that are not detectable, and now they are obviously fairly easily detectable, but if you can make deep fakes that are not detectable by other software, then we can't ever know what's true and what's not true.
Imagine a world like that. Can you imagine?
I am trying to, yes. Yeah. It's very scary. I don't know, you've probably seen on YouTube some of the deep fake things that have, and the whole thing is still in its infancy. But they've, I've seen deep fakes of President Obama saying things he'd never say, and deep fakes of Donald Trump saying things he'd never say. And they're very good. They're very good. They're not.
They are. I mean,
some of them are not detectable by the eye.
No, for a lot of people out there who aren't even aware that there's such a thing as deepfakes, and that's a huge part of the population. And then you get into this whole sort of culture that we have of sharing before we check things out, and people try and share it as if it's factual. It's a challenging, scary world that we live. We're going to take a very, very quick break, and then when we come, let's have a chat about Jailed. If you've just joined us, we are talking to Robert E. French, and we're going to talk a little bit about his book, Jailed. Where did you come upon, where did the idea for Jailed come from, Robert?
Well, I was reading some things about the Innocence Project, which gets people out of jail who have been wrongly jailed. And the Innocence Project, most of their cases, they are able to prove the innocence of the person through DNA evidence. So I wanted a situation where there's a young man in jail because of DNA evidence. And and my protagonist, Cal Rogan, sets about proving that he didn't murder his girlfriend as he's accused of, despite the fact that the DNA evidence all says, yes, he did. And that was the basis that I wanted to work on. And I don't plan my books a lot in advance. I let them grow in the writing. And in that book, as he's looking for alternate people who may actually have committed the crime, it gets to deal with all sorts of interesting areas, including extreme religion and drugs, and the book really grew in interesting directions as I was writing it. And of course, there are some. Sorry, go on.
No, carry on, because I wanted to ask you about the. I meant to ask you this earlier about your other books, but we can talk about in the context of Jailed as well, because I love the covers. Your book covers are amazing. Do you design them? Do you have them designed?
No, I'm not a designer. No, I have a wonderful designer. His name's Nick Castle, and he's in England. Although I was born in England, there's no connection. He just happened to be the best designer that I talked to when I was looking for a designer. He designs all the covers, and what he does, he'll send me 3 covers for a book to choose from, and I usually email those out to. I've got an email list of some of my readers, and I email out the list, and I let my readers choose the cover, and they always choose the right one. So
wow, very clever, very clever.
Mm-hmm. So
that's nice.
Yeah, so he's a wonderful designer. He's working on the covers for the new book, which is called Scammer. But he's great.
Now, I wanted to pick up on something you said earlier. How do you compartmentalize your brain to be able to work on more than one book at a time?
I don't know the answer to that. I don't really know the answer to it. It just kind of happens. I guess when I sit down and write, it just happens, and I don't consciously do it. That's a really good question. I'd like to think about that, because certainly when I'm writing the book set in 2024, I don't confuse it in any way with the current book. Maybe the time difference is the thing that works best for me. I don't know.
And do you generally sort of set aside a time for writing, or do you write when you feel the inspiration is there?
I block off time to write, and sometimes I will get an idea, and if normally I get an idea for the book, I just jot it down in a notepad, and but sometimes I'll get an idea and I've just got to go and write it. So I'll do that sometimes, but generally I just block off specific time to write.
Now, something interesting about you is you mentioned offline that you write at a library mostly. How did that even come about?
I guess it came about because I don't like working from home. A couple of times when I was doing a lot of software development, I would be in a situation where most of my work was done from home, and I wasn't nearly as effective. I like to leave the house to go to work. That's probably a bit old-fashioned, but I'm old, so that's the way it works. So I thought, well, where would be a good place to go? And the Vancouver Public Library is a wonderful location, and it was pretty much an obvious choice for me. So that's how I got to go to the library. And once I started, I was addicted to writing there. During COVID, of course, I couldn't go to the library, and so I was writing at home. But I can write far more words in a day at the library than I can in 3 days at home. It just works for me. It's probably just programmed into me now.
I guess, and I can. I mean, I've been working from home for the better part of my life, but I understand how difficult that was in the early years. Trying to sort of compartmentalize your day into this is home life and this is life, and not to confuse to go back and fro. I've always the flexibility it gives you, but I get what you're saying, because especially for programming, you've got to sort of get into the zone to be able to program. And likewise with writing, you've got to get into that zone. You can't be in the middle of writing and then worry about the dishes or the telephone ringing or something else that's distracting, life around you. So you need that sort of immersive space. And now that I'm talking to you and thinking about it, I can kind of see how you segued from being a software developer into becoming because it's very similar in that it's an immersive experience. So yeah, looks like we've got a little bit of a technical issue then. Hopefully it will come back in a minute. We're talking to Robert French, and I'm not sure whether it's my internet connection or his internet connection, but let's just give it a little while, and we'll see if Robert can join us again. It looks like he's back, and we're back.
Don't know what happened.
Life happened, Robert.
Yes.
Life happened.
Yeah. Life is what happens when you were planning other things.
Absolutely. I say that all the time. One of my favorite sayings is that, sometimes I wish life would stop happening. There's never a dull moment, in life. There's always something to challenge you, excite you, keeps you on your tippy toes, as my sons used to say.
Yes. In your job, you must be very good at ad-libbing when somebody suddenly disappears from the stream.
Oh, no worries. Life happens. So we were talking about, how immersive it is when you are a program, and the same thing when you are an author. You've got to sort of get into that mindset, because if you interrupt it, and I know this because my husband's an enterprise architect, a software developer, so I understand how he gets into the zone. And half the time we've always had between us that he'll say, I'll say, I told you, and he says, no, you didn't. And I realized because his mind was somewhere else.
Yes. Yeah, I know
And
that.
I just got used to that, so I realized, to me, he sort of has this glazed look, and I think, not a good time to talk to him because his mind somewhere else.
Yes. Yeah, I've frequently, I ask my family, do you want to ask me a question? Make sure I'm looking at you when you ask
Yes.
it.
Absolutely. I totally get that.
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
my goodness. So getting back to Jailed, tell us a little bit more about the book, and is there a section you could read out of the book for us, just so people can get an idea?
Yeah, sure. I could read the beginning of the first chapter, which is written from the point of view of a young man named Micah, who is in jail, and he's in one of them. Canada has a couple of pretty nasty prisons, and he's in jail in one of them. It's called the Kent Institution. It's a 20 miles from here, and he's in jail, and he's threatened. So that's the first chapter of the book.
Sounds awesome. I'm looking forward to hearing you read it.
Okay, do you want me to read it right now?
Yes, if you could.
Okay.
I'd love
Absolutely.
that. There's nothing like an author reading. Someone else can read it, even a different narrator. But I think, when an author reads it, there's just something different about it that transports you into the book.
Mhm.
Because I think, you put a sense or a feeling into it that no one else really could.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's like when you hear a director talking about a movie. It's a similar thing. Okay, I'll read the beginning of the first chapter, just a couple of minutes to
Awesome.
give everyone an idea. Okay, and this is Micah. He's a 18-year-old. No, I lie. He's a 19-year-old kid. Okay. His stare cuts into me. His eyes look dead. They give no clue to what's going on behind them, except that it's bad. It's worse than just bad. I can feel the fear turning my stomach to mush, but I can't look away. Not just yet. It's prison protocol. Not too submissive, not too aggressive. He stands up and stretches his menacing 6'6" frame, never taking his eyes off me. Beside me, a voice says, "Don't let the giant bother you, kid." The words give me an excuse to break eye contact. I turn towards him. He's an inch shorter than me, but muscled like I never could be. Blackbird is my only friend in here and has, so far, protected me from the giant's gang who have it in for me. Out of the corner of my eye, I can see my tormentor lumbering towards us. He stops in front of me. I sense rather than see that Blackbird is tensing his muscles beside me. These two hate each other. It can only be a matter of time before violence breaks out between them and their gangs. I just pray that now is not that time. The giant's nose is inches from mine. Maskless, he blows in my face and leers at me. Your boyfriend won't be around here to protect you forever. There's an intake of breath beside me. Prison honor can't let an insult like that go unpunished. I glance quickly at Blackbird. Every muscle in his body is tensed, ready to spring, and his one good eye is drilled into the giant's face. The giant turns towards him with a cruel smile. "Look around," he says. Blackbird doesn't move, but I obey the command. None of Blackbird's gang are in the room, but 3 of the giant's good buddies are. Totally outside my control, my legs move and I take a step back from the violence about to explode. I know I can't escape it this time. 5 long seconds. Is that enough?
Yes, that's perfect.
Okay.
That's really gripping. I mean, you certainly had my attention.
Well, the violence in prison is part of the menu, I guess, and I wanted to observe it from the eyes of a young kid, well, a teenager. So anyway, that's the start of the book, and
did you visit the prison to sort of get a sense of it, or is this just from stuff that you've read?
It's quite difficult to visit that prison. It's a high security prison. You have to have a reason to go there to visit somebody, and I didn't. But a very good friend of mine is a criminal lawyer, and he's been there several times. Okay. And I asked him about the prison, and the word that sticks in my mind, which I used in the book, he said, "It's very grim," and it's a pretty horrible place.
Yeah, I don't think anybody wants to land up in jail. There's an author here in South Africa who's written a number of books from the perspective of the perpetrator to sort of tell their story, and some of them had committed some gruesome crimes, and she'd actually gotten permission to go and visit them in prison to get their story, and that's why I asked that question. But this is not a maximum security prison, so I imagine that would be very, very different. It would be harder to get into a maximum security prison. But I'm still fascinated with the premise of using DNA evidence to have found him guilty other than getting him off, because that's kind of more the context in which DNA evidence is used mostly, is to get people off the hook rather than to prove that they. How did you come up with that idea, by the way?
Just popped into my head. You know, I as I mentioned, I was reading some things around the Innocence Project, and you know, I thought, you know, it would be fun to do it the other way around, to find him innocent, regardless of the fact that the DNA showed he was guilty. And it was quite difficult to work out a way to do that, and yeah, it was difficult to do, but it worked. It worked in the end. So it's one of my favorite books. Of the books I've written, it's one of the favorites. There are a couple of twists in it that and surprises that are really kind of fun. So yeah,
it's always something that I found personally fascinating, you know, because the Bible talks about someone's blood crying out from the ground. And, you know, we didn't know anything about DNA back then.
No.
DNA evidence is a relatively new thing. And I thought that was, you know, one of the amazing things that the Bible would refer to essentially the DNA of a person. You know, I mean, we've had crimes where people don't find a murder weapon, they don't even find a body, but a person got convicted because the person's disappeared and there was evidence of their blood found at the crime scene. You know?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's I just found that was fascinating.
Yeah. And that's a wonderful, I think that's from the King James translation. And that is such wonderful poetic, such a wonderful poetic translation. And, you know, blood crying out from the ground. Authors have used that, you know, because it speaks so much in so few words.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. So, Robert, what's next for you?
Well, the next Cal Rogan book is Scammer, and it starts off with a woman found in the downtown east side of Vancouver, wandering about, and she's lost her memory. And she's discovered by a couple of alcoholics who are friends of Cal from when he was living on the streets. So they take her to him, and he sets about trying to find out who she is. The underlying crime in this is based on an actual crime. So that's and I'm really enjoying this book. So that's coming out towards the end of this year. And also I'm writing on the book set in 2044, and I hope to have that out early next year. So that's what's next.
That's delightful. Robert, I cannot believe that we've been talking for just about an hour. How is that possible?
No, it's crazy, isn't it? Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. So for anybody that wants to grab a copy of Jailed, if you are watching us over on Amazon Live, in fact, I think I've put almost most of your books out, you know, in the carousel on Amazon Live. So go and grab a copy of the book there. Almost all the books are there. See which one you like. But Jailed is definitely in the carousel if you're watching us over on Amazon Live. If you're not, just hop over. And I think in the description of this show, I think I've added all the links to your books there, and the link to Jailed is also there. Robert, one last question I've got for you. When you write, are you writing with the intention for the reader to glean something from the story? Is there a lesson in your books that you want people to get, or just for the enjoyment of reading?
Yeah, I do occasionally choose some sort of theme that I want the readers to get. One of the things that that is important to me is the drug crisis. So I'm a strong believer in legalization and strict control of drugs. Take the drugs out of the hands of the criminals and put it into the hands of tobacco companies or alcohol companies. As much as those companies are not the best companies in the world, they're certainly better than the criminal gangs who are managing the drugs. So sometimes I will have a couple of people argue that point for a very brief moment in time, but I try not to preach that particular idea. I don't like authors who are trying to convince me of something. So I will always present both sides of an argument. In my new book, a lot of people are discussing whether or not humans have free will, and that's a very interesting subject.
That's a very interesting topic.
Yeah, so I'm kind of putting that into a conversation that people are having in the new book, where somebody is convinced that we do and another person is convinced that we don't. And frequently I'll have my protagonist take the side opposite to my own, just for the fun of it.
Make it more interesting.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. So that I will dribble in things that are important. Obviously, in the new book, I want people to understand the potential impacts of artificial intelligence. So the one set in 2044.
And you said that's due for publication towards the end of the year.
No, the book Scammer is due for publication towards the end of the year. The one set at 2024 will be early next year.
I'd definitely love to have you back, because
I'd love to be back. I've really enjoyed it.
That story interests me.
Well, I'd love to come back and talk to you some more. I've really enjoyed this.
That's awesome. Oh my goodness, Robert, thank you so much. This was delightful. Really enjoyed getting some insight into your into how you became an author and your journey. Have you got any, as we close, have you got any words of wisdom that you would like to pass on to any aspiring authors?
Yeah, well, words of wisdom is tricky. When you think you have some wisdom, the universe proves you don't. But one of the things is, if you are an author who, an aspiring author who is in another job right now and you want to try becoming an author, go for it. That's great. But don't assume that because you read a lot, you know how to write. Read. The most important thing for me anyway is the craft of writing. Make sure that you read every book you can on the craft of writing. Take some courses on the craft of writing of your genre. If it's non-fiction, then there are courses that will help you write non-fiction. If it's fiction, there are courses that will help you write fiction. But the one thing that I would say is, whether you're writing fiction or non-fiction, you have to have some sort of tension on every page that drives the reader to turn to the next page. So that's my one-liner: tension on every page.
That's amazing. And but almost every single experienced author that we've had on the show has said the same thing. If you really want to become a good writer, take a few courses. So I definitely would agree that that's great advice, and also making people want to turn every single page, because I think to be known as an author that's got a book where people can't put it down and they stay up all night reading your book is a huge compliment, as opposed to someone taking weeks to read the book. So you've obviously got that factor in your style of writing, when people do stay up to finish the book because they can't put it down. So great advice. Robert, thank you so much. Thank you. Huge thank you to our audiences watching live, and also to our replay viewers. Thank you so much for joining us. You were watching Books with Bridgetti, and our featured author for today was Robert P. French. Robert, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Take care, everyone. We'll see you on the next episode of Books with Bridgetti.
I think this might be, I've been on over 24 different podcasts and radio shows in the last couple of months, and this has to be one of the most sophisticated, what the kids that I used to teach call bomb.com shows and presentations that I've ever been on. It looks fantastic. Thank you for having me here.
Available wherever great books are sold near you.